Hi and welcome back to another episode of Down the Barrel of a Pistol with me, Pistol Pete, and my associate James Wheable. Today I'm going to be drinking Jim Beam from a can. It's a lovely full-fat cola, lovely taste, and very refreshing. What are you going to be drinking, James?
I am drinking Pure Blonde Ultra Low Carb Lager, 80% less carbohydrates with full flavour and no compromise. And just to clarify, the reason I'm drinking that is because currently I'm trying to get into a state of ketosis. I've only been trying it for 6 months, but there you go, I'm giving it a bash. 1.7 carb. Yeah, it's reasonably tasty given it's a low carb beer. Yeah, it's not too bad.
And I've gone for Jim Beam, so...
Much tastier.
Much tastier, indeed. Yeah. Well, today we're obviously going to be discussing a journey that James took recently. But before we go into that, James, you want to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, who you are, how we came to meet, and where you came to this situation now?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, my name is James Wheable. I'm originally from the UK, just outside London. I've been living in New Zealand for close to 17 years now. I'm the general manager of Ada Sales, so sales coaching, business development, and father of 2 beautiful girls. Prior to being in sales or sales coaching, I did a stint in the UK film industry for around 2 to 3 years, thinking I was a pretty cool position. It wasn't very creative, and prior to that I was a qualified chef before venturing into New Zealand, and here we are.
Nice, awesome. And obviously you and me, we obviously do a lot of self-development. We've done coaches, we've done readings, writing, we try out new stuff. But recently you did go on a trip, hence why we're here to do this interview. Do you want to tell everyone what that trip was and what it's about, what this trip is all about?
So the retreat I just went to?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've recently, about 3 to 4 weeks, got back from Peru. Went down to a place called Iquitos, which is the second largest, it's easy for me to say.
You really want to drink one, you know,
it's working. The second largest jungle city in the world, or second largest city, can only be accessed by aeroplane or by boat, so you can't actually stroll into it. And I went to a retreat in the jungle called Blue Morpho, which is a purpose-built retreat in the Amazon. To take part in a 7-day ceremony with a retreat called Blue Morpho. Did I say Blue Morpho already?
Yeah.
I did, yeah. To drink a plant medicine which has been used by Peruvians, shamans, kind of a mystical plant medicine for thousands of years, called Ayahuasca. And I did that over the course of 7 days.
Cool. And obviously, what do you do? The ayahuasca. What is ayahuasca? Because for some out there, that could be a type of, I don't know, juice from tank or something. What is ayahuasca?
I mean, it's becoming more and more widespread and popular now. Yeah. So it's been used for thousands of years, and it's really important to clarify, Pete, that before I go into the explanation of it, number one, I'm not an expert. I've only had one experience with it. I've drunk it 5 times.
Yeah.
It is an illegal substance in many countries. It's legal in that country.
New Zealand?
No, not legal in New Zealand.
Okay.
Definitely not. It's a psychedelic tea that is brewed from a variation of different trees, but mainly the ayahuasca vine, and also something called chacruna, which has an element of a psychoactive element called DMT, which is called dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah.
So while that would be translated in a Western society as a drug and a Section A drug, in these countries they've been used for thousands of years to heal people, essentially. So it's a plant medicine, I guess I got onto the bandwagon of it probably around 24 months ago.
Yeah.
It's like most people nowadays, I like to experiment with particular things. I like to self-develop and push my boundaries. So I watched a number of podcasts initially. I don't know exactly where it started, but it may have been a Joe Rogan podcast.
Joe Rogan, you said that you stumbled across it when he was talking about, was it mushrooms or something?
No, I think so. No, Joe Rogan. I think it was DMT. Okay. So, never heard of it before, which I was astonished by, and therefore watched a bunch of information on that, which led to a bunch of interviews I saw with people like Graham Hancock, Dennis McKenna, Terence McKenna, Aubrey Marcus, who runs a health optimization business called On It, who's also a big psychonaut who advocates for the use of these compounds.
Yeah.
So over the period of 2 years, I sourced a lot of information, became incredibly fascinated by it, but the tipping point was I was in Bali in August this year, went away for a family holiday, and I read a book by a guy called Michael Pollan, who's a New York columnist, journalist, very well-known author.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book which was called How to Change Your Brain, which was the new science of psychedelics, where he embarked on a journey for around 12 months to try these different compounds from LSD, lysergic acid, from psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT. It's a huge book. It goes through the history of the use of these substances, stigmas attached to it, new developments in science with how they're being treated to use or to treat anxieties, PTSD, a whole range of things. And that was kind of the tipping point for me to say, this is something, you know, with the overwhelming information now, that I want to try. And just on the side note, I'm also a regular giver to an organisation called MAPS. I'm one of their regular donors. And MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic, and I can't remember the last bit. That was easy enough for me to to get to that. Who have just confirmed that psilocybin or LSD psychedelics are now in phase 3 clinical trials to treat PTSD, which is a huge step forward as well.
Huge, yeah. And well, I think it's weird when you look at with how the world is at the moment, with how the word, I guess the nice word would say, touchy, or how PC that everyone has to be and stuff like that, how that's the way of the world, but also stuff like drugs that everyone would think is just party and recreational are starting to get moved actually a lot more open about, if where no one used to talk about that in the past, but that's now talked about a lot more compared to where a lot of other stuff is becoming like you can't talk about, if you know what I mean, because of the PC. It's always an interesting shift on those two, if you know what I mean, I think.
Well, I think so, yeah. And again, you know, that whole perspective is being shifted, and again, you know, you have to base a lot of your opinions in life on facts, not assumptions. You know, we live in a world of, you know, variable information, so I always make sure that I arm myself with the information that I can do, and as a result, you know, go and experiment and do these things for myself. And, you know, again, I'm not necessarily qualified as many people out there are to talk about ayahuasca like I'm a professional, but I can talk about my own experiences, and again, sourcing all the information and not just reading one article. I'm talking 2 years of pretty intense research into that subject, gave me enough assurance, but also a level of skepticism to say this is something that I need to find out for myself, something I need to experiment with and kind of have that experience. And I'm eternally grateful that I actually did it.
So you said that you've been looking into that for 24 months, and I work out in the same office as you, and I can definitely see how over that 24 months it wasn't just you came up with the idea in the last month and then went on it. It was a whole process. I think it was Joe Rogan, I think we watched some of those podcasts where they had talked about the psychedelics, and you said that you thought it was, which one was it, the drug you said that he was talking about? DMT, yeah, and I think it was that, and then it went on to the Aubrey Marcus stuff, and we were looking into that, but it's been interesting seeing you getting closer and closer doing it, because you've got more and more interest. I think every other week you'd be like, Pete, have a look at this, and then there's a new video or a new thing you've seen about it with new evidence backing both sides. And then, you came back from that holiday and you were like, I'm going to do this ayahuasca trip. And I was like, sure. I thought it was another one of those things, but once you actually booked it and you paid for it, I was noticing the change in what you're actually looking into people's experiences. And I think the first couple you saw were really enlightening, and you were getting really excited. And I remember you watched one video that was a terrible experience. You just came out white-faced as if I haven't chose the right option on doing this. I don't know if I should do this. But what was your, obviously you've done it and it's a good thing, obviously they call it, was it a spiritual awakening, or, you know, I mean, a growth or a way of self-development, but what did you go in for it for? What did you want to get for it? Why did you feel like you had to go in and do the experience?
Yeah, so first off, with actually doing it, I would give that credit to Belinda, my partner, because I've been speaking about it intensely, especially when we was in Bali. You know, we had 2 weeks together as a family, and I was reading about it every day. So when we arrived back home, I think I'd reached a tipping point with her frustration. Where
just talking about it.
I think I was just boring her. So she commanded me, made me promise her that I was going to book the retreat, because I was going to put it off until January next year. So eventually she pushed the button, she went on, sourced it all, booked the flights, blah, 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 so I got it done. The reason I did it, well, I'm 41 years of age.
Looking good.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, yeah. I don't like to fly in the face of public opinion, Pete. There's a whole number of different reasons why I did it. I guess from an early age, probably as far back as I can remember, from the age of 20, I periodically used to have bouts of depression in my life, and I noticed that it went about every sort of 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I went on antidepressive medication was probably when I was about 25 years of age. Then I had another spell when I was 30 and around 35. The one that hit me when I was 35 was a particularly intense period in my life, and nothing particularly going wrong. You know, I've always had a reasonably good lifestyle.
Yeah.
Maybe my mentality wasn't the best as it could be, but when I hit 35, a whole bunch of things happened, which made me really examine the way I was living.
Yeah.
So I made some incredibly intense changes in my life, from exercise to the information I was feeding my brain every single day, to my diet, to my relationships, to my perspective. And that was a real game changer for me. But, you know, you've got your conscious and your subconscious.
Yeah.
My conditioning coming from the UK has been one for many years, which is, you know, be the best at what you're doing, you know.
Yeah.
Make lots of money, and even I've consciously made shifts in my life to say that my life's not about getting more, attaining more in my life, it's making the most of what I want.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a bout of serious depression in a long time. I think I fixed that. There was still something under the surface which was not congruent with my values.
Yeah.
So...
And if you don't mind us interrupting just before you go into more detail on that, you were saying actually it was an interesting point. You said it wasn't that anything was going necessarily wrong, you said, on a couple of those times. I think that's interesting when sometimes people think depression, they think everything has to be rock bottom and they go, the person's depressed. But over time, when someone's gone through depression and maybe their life isn't in ruins, some people then question, you're not depressed. You know, or how can you be depressed because of this and this? It's an interesting when people talk about depression, it's not just about being rock bottom. It's sometimes it's a illness, say, per se, or it's like kind of a thought thing where you're in. It doesn't mean that everything's going bad in your life. And I think that sometimes stems, when I've talked to people that have suffered from it, they've sometimes felt guilty because they know that their life isn't that bad. And that's made them sometimes affect worse. Was that your experience in those other times? Or?
100%, yeah. And everyone's their own expert. For anyone who hasn't suffered depression before, really shouldn't be making statements about it.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want those people to experience it. But everyone's their own expert. And I think you bang on, is that you have your intelligent thinking brain which will rationalise particular things. I have all these things to be grateful for, but I'm not necessarily feeling that on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And like Tony Robbins would say, is that success without fulfillment's the ultimate failure.
Yeah.
So while I've had a level of contentment and purpose and focus in the last 5 or 6 years, there's still been something under the surface which has been to do with my conditioning, my training, I guess, mentally through my life, which has not allowed me to reach these levels of happiness and joy that I've had in a long time. I often question things.
Yeah.
And I think, it's like horoscopes. You read something, you're going to find something that relates to you.
Yeah.
So after you do a huge amount of study into the research or the evidence around these compounds or these plant medicines, they make these very, very bold claims. They're fixing people's addictions, their depressions or anxieties, and not just for negative instances. These are for higher levels of exploration. You're looking into different dimensions. You're exploring, increasing your spirituality. So for me, the main purpose of doing it was, number one, to push my boundaries, but also to see that firsthand, to see what it was going to do. So it's a whole bunch of reasons for doing it, I guess.
Yeah, and so I think there's a lot of people that can talk about that underlying thing that you said. I think that's for me, I think I had a little bit of that when I was back saving up to go travelling. I'd finished uni, got back home, didn't really enjoy being there, I wanted to be away. So I always had that feeling underneath me. I guess the only thing for me was I knew I was travelling in 2 years' time to get away, but I think a lot of people can probably relate to that, where everything's going right and they're like, I just don't know, there's this feeling, it's like a shadow, isn't it, or something like over your shoulders that's just like, just doesn't seem like everything's just lining up, or it does for a short period of time, but then it doesn't fully. So it's interesting. You said you just wanted to see how this goes to help branch that line along with your goals.
And sorry to interrupt, but to touch on that as well, something I've been practicing is mindfulness for a few years, you know, in terms of meditation, mindfulness. It's very hard not to think thoughts. But the concept of living in the present moment, and you know what you talk about, and what I see from many people is a lot of people struggle in life. You know, I can't talk for every person. In the industry we're in, you know, we talk a lot about performance mentality, and you know, you've got to practice what you preach. Yeah. In that respect, so I think, you know, I don't see a lot of people fulfilled because they're consistently looking at this concept in the world we've set, which is, you know, set the goal. Reach the goal, reward yourself, whether that's, you know, having the washboard stomach, you know, I don't know, fucking 2,000, oh yeah, of course mate, absolutely, yeah, just covered a few things. Yeah. 2,000 likes on your post, for example, driving the nice car, and you know, they're okay things. I don't judge people for wanting those things, but it's almost like we gauge our success based on getting to the end destination. Versus enjoying the process. Yeah. And I'm someone who's been caught between those two thieves a lot, you know, sometimes reflecting on the past too much and also worrying about the future, so you tend to not to live in the present moment. Yeah. And there's only so much reading you can do, you know. Before you have to do. You know, I remember watching a Gary Vaynerchuk video which had it was a kind of a kick in the nuts for me almost. One of those things you kind of appreciate but also didn't want to watch. Yeah. Which was, stop reading the fucking book. Yeah. Stop going to the seminar. You know, stop doing the fucking goal book. Just fucking do it. You know? And it was kind of like I got mixed feelings around that.
It was funny, I watched the exact same video, hence when I started doing those 10 PPT first step videos that I did, or now been renamed First Steps. But I remember the whole time I was like, oh, I'm worried about the scared, and I'm just going to read books on it. And I think I'd watch videos, books, and then I just stumbled across that Gary Vaynerchuk one that said, stop fucking reading all this stuff. It's great to read. Just fucking do. Just do it. Just once I did, I was like, okay. Quickly set up a camera and just went for it. As everyone's probably watched, the quality wasn't as good as this, but there we are. That was the first steps. But yeah.
Well, that's right. You know, you got to take the action. And the same deal with booking this, you know, this ceremony down to Peru, because again, I'm someone that, you know, I make decisions very slowly, but I act quickly. But you know, I was still in that mode of thought about doing my research on the best retreat to go to, and I knew really, you know, exactly what I was going to do. Yeah. And it took Belinda, my partner, to just go, do it, press the button. Yeah, she's the action person. I'm, you know, paralysis analysis.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, what was your experience with doing it? What was your? Because there was a couple of different sessions you said that you went through. What is it like? What did you go through? And what was your experience?
It's going to be incredibly hard to do it justice in a short period of time, so I'll try and do the long story short of it. So the first off thing to explain is that I went to a retreat called Blue Morpho. Blue Morpho is founded by a gentleman called Hamilton Souther, who's very well known in those circles. He's 40 years of age, he's an Ayahuasca, I think I'm saying that correctly, maestro master shaman. Very unique situation that he's a Western guy from California. And when he was at the age of 20, the story goes, is that he wasn't particularly content with his life. He had a vision which told him he needed to travel to Peru to meet a particular person. You know, this is not doing the story justice whatsoever. I'm just conscious of time. So he did that. He got trained by a lineage of ayahuasqueras or maestros, who are very well known in those circles in Peru, and he did his apprenticeship. Normally it would take around 10 years for someone to become a maestro master shaman. That's if they make it through. It's like training to be a fucking Green Beret, basically. No one makes it, or the SAS. He did it in 2 years. So at the age of around 22, 23, became a master shaman. That's unusual in itself, but second to that, of course, it's a very, very closed group almost, that it's usually reserved for people who are indigenous to those areas. Yeah. So it's almost like Luke Skywalker, you know, being trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah. So he founded the retreat. His master shaman is a guy called Don Alberto, who is very, very well known. He's got a long lineage and, you know, family history of people being in that area. Blue Morpho is probably one of the most respected and well-known retreats. And these retreats are almost like being at a hospital in that sense. You know, they're not going down for a tourist experience. Yeah. And we were very, very fortunate enough that Hamilton Souther, on the day I arrived at the retreat at Blue Morpho Centre to me to go down to the jungle, had been off the grid for 3.5 years. So he hadn't been running any ceremonies that had been done by a number of people he trained, plus Don Alberto. Yeah. So the day I arrived, he was there. It was his first retreat back. He was guest starring. which was just fucking amazing. Yeah, I was almost a bit starstruck, you know, and incredibly grateful to have him there. So once you meet the group, there's about 22 participants that go along, and you're travelling down to, I can't remember the name of the area in particular. It's about 2 hours inland, and they've built this beautiful purpose-built retreat for the purpose of people going down to have these experiences and ceremonies. Very well structured, very well guided. There's a number of staff members there, number of helpers. So when you go down, initially you stay in your own rooms, and each room, there's 4 to each room. It's important to note that you're staying in very traditional settings. There is no electricity in the room, so you're using sort of what's called like solar powered lamps.
Yeah.
They try and influence you not to be connecting to the internet, so mobile phones are not there. There was the ability to connect to a hotspot in emergencies, but it was advised not to. You're going down for a traditional experience. There was an element of people every day who had obviously profile picture emergencies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was interesting. Again, you know, other people's opinions.
What, within your group as well, doing them?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was 22 people there, so
that's strange.
It was.
If you've gone there for that reason, to them still.
Yeah, I think it took away from the authenticity of the experience, and for me, I was away from my loved ones, my children, my partner, for the whole week. So I wanted to make sure that I was respectful of that experience, and therefore did not connect to the mobile phone. Checking bloody social media while you're having a mystical, magical experience just didn't seem right. Yeah. So when you get down there, you connect with the group, you meet a whole bunch of different people. I was fortunate enough to make some lifelong friends when I was there. The group has a pre-ceremony talk in a group setting. We were fortunate again to have Hamilton do that, who kind of explained that, the expectations of the ceremony, the diet, making sure that there was people there who didn't have any alcohol, any unsanctioned foods or unauthorised foods. The diet's very, very strict. Yeah. If you eat foods that aren't in line with ayahuasca, then it can have a very adverse effect. They were very, very clear on that expectation, and kind of setting the expectation for the ceremony, which the first one he said was going to be a cleansing ceremony, which was releasing negative energies, spirits, etc., etc. So, there's a whole bunch of things I could tell you about that, but the very first ceremony, you go into a ceremony house. So it's like a circle rondable. Rondable is an African term, it's the only way I can explain it. Yeah. And it's set up with a bunch of chairs, mattresses, spit buckets, which I'll tell you about in a second, toilet paper, and they ask you to become quite familiar with that setting before you go in. Yeah. So I went in with a couple of guys I'd met, both from America, and we were sharing a room. We went and got our position. And we got into the room about 5:30. At 6 o'clock, Hamilton would come to the room just as it was starting to get dark, and did a very quick pre-ceremony talk again to remind people of some of the rules, regulations, safety settings. Incredibly well structured and managed. And then at around 6:15 to 6:30, I believe, that Don Alberto would come in, and then the ceremony would begin. And it was dark by this point in time, so you got a couple of gas lamps in there. Needless to say, the energy in the room is quite anxious. Yeah. I'd never taken ayahuasca before. I'd had some experience with those kind of compounds, but knew, it was going to be an intense experience, which they try and prepare you for. So what happens is they come into the room, they pour the ayahuasca, and to give you some kind of context, ayahuasca is a brew, or a psychedelic tea, which is brewed from those plants. So therefore it's a very thick brown substance. Lovely. And you hear from other people that it's a very unique taste. It's a sacred taste. You have to have respect for it. But I was a little bit apprehensive about digesting it. The last thing I wanted to do was drink it and be sick in front of these maestros. Yeah. So they call you up to the front of the room. Either Hamilton or Don Alberto would serve the ayahuasca. In fact, Hamilton South, they didn't actually pour the ayahuasca. That was done by another person, a guy called Sama. And then they would sing an Icaro into that as well. If you'd never done ayahuasca before, therefore they would recommend the dosage and what they base that on. I don't know, let's say their years of experience. So you go up the front, you'd sit there cross-legged or on your knees, however you wanted to. They would sing an Icaro being a form of language in ayahuasca, which is to call in the spirits, a whole bunch of different reasons. And therefore you'd go and sit back and they'd ask you just to relax and be calm. So then they would turn the lights off in the room, so you're in pitch darkness, and then they would start to sing, and you go into the ceremony as well. So your job is really to sort of sit back, relax. Setting in these kind of experiences are incredibly important. So your mindset, your intention, you have to try and set an intention. What are you there for? And the setting, of course, being perfect. You're in the middle of the jungle.
And you said they do a ceremony when you're in there. Are you just quiet and they're just doing these chants, or are they talking? Is he kind of like leading you, like you're doing?
There was a mixture of everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so the ceremony in itself, throughout the whole process, which lasts for between about 4 to 5 hours, they are having chats. They're talking to the group. There's moments and periods of silence, and of course there's the music, the chants, the singing, the Icaros that they're singing as well. And they're very structured in the way, of course, they do that. So as you drink the ayahuasca, people purge. It's a purgative substance, which means that people purge in a number of different ways, and which I knew about and was well prepared for. And that could be from being sick. That's quite a common one. For some people that comes out in the form of shitting. Fortunately, no one shat in the room, or at least not to my knowledge. Anyway, there's toilets and showers behind. Lots of yawning, lots of sweating, mental turbulence, whatever there can be. And you're reminded that because it's a plant medicine, it's releasing negative energies and aligning certain things in your spirit or in your mentality, that you have to remind yourself that when you're having that purge, that's what's happening. So like most things, I sat there for the first half an hour, focusing on my breathing, focusing on the music, the Icaros, the drums, and the instruments they were using. And probably around 45 minutes to maybe an hour, it's hard to gauge time, an hour in, with my eyes closed, I started to gauge some fractal patterns inside, but I was still conscious of the fact that, if you look for something, you might find it.
Yeah, because that's what I thought it would be like. You're being that nervous that you take it, and then you're consciously thinking, am I feeling it? And it would kind of put you off the experience, but I guess with the lights down and with them, I guess that's what the chanting's all about, the side of it.
Well, that's right, You're incredibly sensitive to light, to movement, to vibration with these substances. But also, if you do your research on these, these experiences, it's very clear that not any one person has the same experience with it. It's individual to anybody, and ayahuasca is going to work in many different ways with different people. They say it will give you what you need, not what you want. And a lot of people go there really seeking these visions or hallucinations. I prefer the word visions, and in some cases people don't get those, so they believe that ayahuasca doesn't like them, or it's not working. And it's always working in some form or another. So probably around 45 minutes to about an hour in, I had my eyes open in the room. It was very, very dull, but because there was light coming through, and also people are often getting up throughout the evening. You have to take a headlamp in with a red light setting, so people are getting up quite frequently to find their way to the toilet, to do their things, whatever it may be. So there's a whole mixture of light coming on in the room. It's very low setting. I started to see what I could only describe as kind of tentacles coming down in the room, and there were hammocks in the rooms that had been tied around banners. In the daytime you can hang from those hammocks, so I could see these tentacles coming down.
Thank God you said tentacles. Something else. I was like,
they could have been. It could have been testicles. I don't know. But no, it looked like tentacles to me. I think that's the word. So I started to notice that. Also, as I opened my eyes in the room, because of this red light setting, the helpers or the workers in there, or even the guests, would be holding the light around their chest here. So it's almost like a red light. So I can only describe it as I started to get the visuals of, I don't know, what's it called? Assassin's Creed? The video game? The video game? I don't know where I'm getting that from, like some kind of ceremony. And I started to notice that one person's legs would almost form into around 10 to 12 legs. You know, I was getting these kind of like trails of it, of people walking around the room. It seemed like there was a lot more people in there than normal, and I'm focusing on my breathing as it's happening. And because I've got no reference point to what this experience is going to give me, and I'm feeling the intensity of the experience, heavy-headed, starting to get the visuals, some mental turbulence, is I started to get quite anxious and apprehensive. One of my biggest fears, I don't know why, was losing my sense of breath.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the big fears I had, so I try not to focus on that. And they say focus on the Icaros as you're going along. Very, very hard to articulate these kind of experiences to anyone who might be listening to this, of course, without sounding like a fucking nutbag. But I can only explain it as what I saw. Was, as I closed my eyes, I started to get incredibly vivid, rich colour, fractal patterns, geometric patterns that were coming through. They weren't dark in nature. They were a mixture of different colours. The settings changing consistently. And I started to feel quite heavy-headed, as I say, mental turbulence, almost like being drunk, almost being dizzy. And then to anchor myself, I would come over onto my knees and put my hand on my head, which is something I used for the entire week.
Yeah.
And as I was looking down, it started to really take an intense setting. So I was getting very, very heavy visuals, and with the drumming and the singing going on, that increased the intensity to, you know, the vibrations. So this is probably was one of the hardest moments, because as I was looking down, these fractal patterns, colours, images were coming towards me, and I was seeing what can only be explained as some form of demonic faces. And I had to keep reminding myself that I was purging. It's the release of negative energy, you know, release it, relax, breathe. And one of the clear things I would say is, if you need help in the ceremony, you must call for help.
Yeah.
Me being, you know, the male ego and not hearing anybody else in that room call for help, felt like I wanted to.
Yeah.
But again, the ego kind of kicked in, so I didn't ask for help.
Yeah.
But I was familiar with one of the workers there, a Russian girl called Anna, who was sat probably about 3 to 4 seats over, so I called her over.
Yeah.
And I said, like, it's getting pretty intense. I was sweating, it was incredibly hot. Can I get some water? So they had one of the workers come over where they put a towel over your neck, and they put a bucket over your lap. The bucket's also there for people that are purging consistently and being sick. And there's a number of people being, you know, quite intensely sick in that room. So they poured some water over my head, which kind of cooled the experience down slightly, and I felt calmed, obviously knowing I had that support. But then it came back again in a second wave. Yeah. And at this point in time, I felt a vibration in my ribs, almost like a buzzing sensation, and just a complete intensity of these patterns coming up towards me. And then I purged, which was, I remember being sick. And I was only sick the once, but I kind of settled down after that.
Okay.
And the experience of that evening kind of continued in that sense, where it would come in waves. At one point I had to get up, and I knew there were showers available, so I had to get up and try and navigate my way across the ceremony house. I was fortunate enough that Hamilton was there, because somebody else was being looked after or attended to at that time. And he took me over into the shower room, where I cooled myself down, and I said to him, I remember, he said, you're doing really well. And I said, yeah, I said, I'm definitely a believer now. Yeah. Which he laughed at, because I said, I can't believe this. Yeah. I can't believe what's happening. And he laughed and said, yeah, it's going to come in waves. So that first night, from what I can recollect, was really sort of setting the reference point for it. I had an incredible experience. I was blown away by the visions, the visuals. But I didn't get anything in sense of messaging, you know.
Nothing too personal or anything?
No, not really, no. No, I didn't come out of the experience. I came out of it with a massive level of satisfaction that I completed that first ceremony. You know, and to backtrack, there was one particular thing actually. Because I was feeling a high level of anxiety and fear towards the situation, not knowing what was going to stop, at one point the music stopped, and Hamilton said in the room, he said, everyone take a deep breath. So I took a deep breath, and you sometimes forget you're there with other people having a very similar experience. Some people are having amazing experiences, some people are having a tough night. Yeah. And then he remember him saying that the fear is not being created by ayahuasca. your brain is creating the fear. And in that instant, I just completely calmed.
Yeah.
And had quite a profound effect on the whole evening. And the lesson I took from that is that, you know, we have so much control over our perceptions, our thoughts and our feelings, and literally by one person saying one thing in that kind of environment just calmed me down in a second. Shows you how easy it can actually be as well. Yeah.
That's cool. And that was your first one of the purging, as they said, and it was getting all of that out. What was the second session supposed to be, and like what was that experience for you?
Well, I mean, each ceremony is different. The shamans will guide it through what they believe a ceremony should be, and it's really hard to recollect everything. The second ceremony for me was I'd already set the intention before, and I'd spoken to a couple of people around setting that intention. And the main thing for me is that I knew I had all these things in my life, maybe I've already discussed this, that I've, you know, to be grateful for.
Yeah.
And I practice this gratitude journal, you know, every single day. I get up, I write 3 things I'm grateful for. But realise that the connection between being sincere, saying what I feel should be grateful for, versus feeling that on an emotional level.
Yeah.
So when I spoke to an individual about that, they said you need to ask ayahuasca, and in part of the belief system is that ayahuasca is a female spirit. So therefore you can ask ayahuasca to give you guidance.
Yeah.
So I was told to open my heart and show my brain. That was the intention, ask ayahuasca to show that to you.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. I'd written a whole bunch down of intentions, but I didn't want to treat the experience like a smorgasbord.
Yeah.
Of, you know, hey, I want to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
You know, drink the ayahuasca and your life's fixed. So I knew that I had to do the work.
Yeah.
So when I went into the second ceremony, I drank a bit more this time. I think I drank around a third of a cup. We went through the normal procession of it. And that evening was incredible. You know, I had very similar instances. This time I had a reference point. As you're starting to feel the strength of the experience, it increases. But at this point in time, I'd really focused on the thing from the night before, which was ayahuasca's not creating the fear, you're creating the fear. And every time I did that, you know, that just calmed me.
Yeah,
you know, I controlled my breathing. So that night was probably one of the most enjoyable experience I've ever had. I was getting incredible visuals.
Before you go too much into describing it, sorry, what it was, because I'm thinking from the description of it, I'm like, that's incredible. It's like, I can imagine myself being there, but then I also imagine, you said there was another, 15 people with you?
22.
Or 22. I always think, was it easy for you to enjoy your own experience, or was there times where you were just about to enjoy it and you saw someone rushing to the toilet and, or doing whatever, you know, because they must be having their own experiences that sometimes are more visual or more movement and more...
Yeah, I mean, there was a few people in the room that were having definitely some challenging experiences.
Yeah.
I can't comment on what they were going through, but they were quite extreme, so some extreme purging, some vocal expressions of the experience they were having.
And you could still control on your...
I think, you know, I mean, you're there for 4 or 5 hours, and again, you know, it changes this whole way we perceive or we interpret information.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're in the jungle, you know, you can hear the noises outside from all the, you know, array of animals. There was one that sounded like a predator, which was just fucking awesome. I love that one. There was like a cackling frog that sounded like an old woman. The gentleman I was sat next to, he fucking didn't like that one at all. I thought it was brilliant. But you kind of expected that. So yeah, absolutely, there were some instances where something that was going on in the room could distract you from the situation, but not to a point, unless you made it a focal point. You know, again, what you choose to focus on is where the energy flows. So if you made it your point to focus on somebody else's experience, then of course that's the kind of experience you get.
Did anyone join their experience, like have joint experiences, you know what I mean, where it's happening and they sit and then they maybe kind of have a joint experience, or was it everyone was kind of having their own?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, because, you know, this will go on a bit of a, we digress slightly, but, and I won't mention the guy's name, of course, you know, for privacy reasons, but a guy I built a bit of a relationship who was sat to my left on the second night, at probably the peak of the ceremony, the music was at its full flow, and the maestro Hamilton was blending in traditional Peruvian or ayahuasca music and Icaros, but he also blends in very modern stuff, which is unique.
Okay.
So he'll be using Icaros from Jim Morrison and lyrics from Pink Floyd songs, which was just incredible.
Yeah.
And so let's go back slightly.
Yeah.
Was that particular experience on the second night was I'd managed to connect with what I believe was the spirit.
Yeah.
As crazy as that may sound for
Yeah.
anyone who's never done these kind of experiences, and I'm certainly not someone who'd ever used the word spirit prior to this experience, was, again, I was anchored over on my knees. At this point in time, I could feel the energy in the room. My hair, which as you can see isn't very long,
Yeah.
felt, as long as Fabio's, for example.
Yeah.
It was like down my shoulders, and it was spiraling into the psychedelics. So that was connected. I could feel it connected. And I was in these amphitheatres or stadiums of patterns and colours that were just never ending and were vivid and were just amazing. And I couldn't feel the weight of my body. So I sat in this chair, it was like a rocking chair, couldn't feel the weight of it. And I was asking questions of ayahuasca. Now, whether you choose to believe that ayahuasca is a spirit that's talking to you, or it's your, it's yourself, it's that.
Were you internally asking questions, you mean, or you out loud?
Internally, yeah. Again, because, internally asking questions, not physically, but I couldn't hear a voice. I was asking questions internally, and I was getting answers back to certain things. Whether that was ayahuasca or whether it was me, detached from my sense of myself, asking these questions back. Because what ayahuasca tends to do is it removes the ego, flattens your ego, so it presents you, at least for me, presents you with the reality of who you are, good and bad. You don't have the opportunity to have your intelligent thinking brain be able to come in and guide the information, and push it in the direction
you should
want
think.
to.
And
am I a good father? And when you're crap, and convince yourself one or the other, and vice versa. So, in this particular evening, I was asking questions which I was getting the answers back to, which gave me a huge sense of peace, which is part of the reason I've been there for, to get fulfillment. And really what it did was it truly did connect my heart with my brain. So I felt that connected, and I felt gratitude on the most sincere level. And that, as a result, gave me joy that I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt happiness, but the joy was amazing. And I was asking ayahuasca to show me happiness, to show me laughter, to show me joy, and I could feel these. I could feel these at levels I hadn't felt in years and years, 100%.
And was it through memory, that, or just fresh was it just the feeling, you mean?
And I think memory in terms of nostalgia of feeling that particular way, but God, when you're a kid, you imagine how excited you are when it's Christmas Day. Or you're going to the cinema, or just, haven't seen your dad for a couple of days, those kind of things. So I felt that with no expectation of having to be anything other than myself. Sometimes we blunt our feelings and our expressions for the fear of other people's perceptions. In this particular instance in time, I was clenching my fist, and I was laughing, and I was joyful, and I was in such a positive way that I didn't feel that I was going to be judged by anyone, and I certainly didn't care, if that's a word to express it. But to come back to your question, feeling a connection, at that particular time, I was having such an amazing experience. I looked to the left of me, and the guy to the left of me also was looking over as well. And he said, fucking dude, he's from New York, this guy. I said, dude, this is fucking incredible. And I said, man, I know, it's just amazing. And at the end of that evening, when we discussed it, we also shared a room. We got built a very good friendship. He said I could feel the energy. We were sharing a connection energy, which again sounds fucking nuts. Because prior to that, going in, I'd heard all this information. Had I listened to myself having this conversation 3-4 years ago, I'd be going, what's this bellend talking about? For want of anyone that it's an English term for an idiot. Again, that judgment part. But in the space of that one evening, which lasted 4 to 5 hours, I hadn't felt a deeper sense of peace or clarity or focus than I had done in a long time. And for me, that was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, to think that, you know, from what we spoke about earlier through my life, you know, of going through these bouts and periods of depression or, you know, uncertainty in my life, and having to put myself, you know, go to the gym and take antidepressants, go and speak to people, change my diet, read books, which for no second am I disputing as being helpful tools, but they have their process to do something like that, and in the period of one evening, to come out feeling fixed or feeling sense of peace, you know, it just seems, it goes against the grain of everything that we're taught, I guess. One really interesting point in that second ceremony as well, which almost sounds crazy, was I tried to pass positive energy over to an individual in that room who I knew was having a particularly hard time.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that thought came in, but I thought to myself, I was having such a phenomenal evening, such an amazing evening. I thought I'd share that experience and try and pass on positive energy, which is not a thought I'd ever had. And the second I did that, I started to feel an ache in my stomach, literally instantaneously.
Okay.
So I rationalised, I said, why am I feeling a stomach ache? Maybe I shouldn't be passing this energy on. But I kind of worked out in that instant that I was probably sending a message to my central nervous system, which was telling me I was passing this energy on to somebody else, and as a result it was translating it or communicating in a sense of stomachache.
Yeah.
So do I think I was truly passing on energy? Well, maybe. But I think the power of thought is so powerful that I sent that message to my brain, and therefore it came and translated itself in the form of
a stomachache.
Stomachache. And that explains to me in that instant how we can make ourselves sick.
Yeah.
You know, people get sick, they get worried, they get anxious. It's the power of thought is toxic, or it can be uplifting.
Well, when you talk about that, there was the Darren Brown thing, one of his episodes, one of his specials. You know Darren Brown, the English illusionist and stuff, but he had done it where I think in the end there was loads of groups, about 10 or 15 different groups, where it was like from acne to fear of heights to fear of public speaking to stomach aches to, like, it was smoking, it was all of the, even from the physical, like the stuff like smoking, all the way to I'm scared of heights, and even like rashes on their face and acne and stuff. And he did a thing where he did it on these pills, where he said, look, new documentary, doing on pills, if you take it, it's going to cure this stuff. And a month later he did all these different groups, and all of them would come back and go, literally my rash is gone. And he was just like breaking over, it's like, it's just sugar.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? But the power is so strong. And there's that film Split, where they're doing that new one, Mr. Glass, the sequel to it. That Split was based on the one with, which we talked about, I think, in one of my presentations, about the brain having the split personalities, how psychiatrists even seen people, marks appear on skin and eye colours change right in front of them when they were changing personalities. So like you say,
I think it's Dr. Bernie Segal would say that when he was speaking to people with multiple personalities, that based on the power of their belief that he could physically see eye colour change in that instance, they morphed into these personalities, ailments, marks on the skin. Again, and you know, I've heard that again, and you know, almost, you know, anything's possible, but I kind of calculated that evening is that, you know, the power of thought does have a huge effect on not just obviously your mood, but also your health.
Physical, yeah.
Yeah, physical.
Yeah, and that was your second experience, and what was the next one's like?
Well, there's 5 ceremonies over, you're there for 7 days, 6 nights. Yeah. So you do 3 ceremonies on the spin each night, and then on the 4th day, it's a rest day almost, but there's a fire ceremony, a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on, and then you have your 4th and 5th, and then it's wrapped up. Yeah. So with the awareness of time, going through every single experience probably, you know, would be overkill. But the one I probably would explain to someone was the 4th one. So the 3rd one for myself was a really good experience. I felt slightly disappointed, which is not an emotion I wanted to have. Yeah. But it was, I think, the expectation of the second one.
Such a high one, yeah.
Yeah, and they're really clear that every day you drink ayahuasca, you're not the same person the day after. You're you plus ayahuasca, then plus ayahuasca. Yeah. So we realise it's still in our system.
And sorry, just quickly before you jump into the 4th one thing I did want to ask that I forgot to ask about the second. Do you think the reason you had such a happiness, do you think, because like you said, you had that nerve, you had that anticipation, it's kind of like when I've done public speaking and we've talked about it, I'm so nervous, but then afterwards I have that rush, and it's kind of like if I did a public speaking the next day, I'd be so much more enjoyable. Was it maybe because you were so anxious on that first one and you purged and you had that in your head, you were like, so that's the tough one out of the way. The next one I'm not as nervous for, which allowed you to be a bit more relaxed and happiness, do you think? Or do you think it just naturally just came? It was just like...
I think there was a couple of elements to that. Number one, I'd had the first reference point, but number two also, I'd been guided by the Maestro Hamilton when I was there. And it's someone I deeply respected, so I'd had that conversation with him, so I felt this assurance and guidance. And also when I went up to drink the ayahuasca, there was a reference point to that as well. So I mean, it's hard to know. It's hard to know, but maybe.
I just said But now carry on with you said the third one was good, but you said the
third one was good. It was more of an experience, but I think I'd set myself up. But again, no ayahuasca experience is the same.
Yeah.
So the fourth one, I knew that I was ready to go deeper, so therefore to drink more ayahuasca. And also, to be really clear, Pete, is that when you go to these ceremonies, there's no expectation you have to drink.
Oh, okay.
And there's no expectation of how much you should drink. They will guide you, they will support you through that. There was a few people that decided not to drink on particular nights, and there's no expectation of it as well.
You can still join.
Absolutely, yeah. They recommend you in the ceremony, you join it 100%, yeah. And you can still get a lot, And you
I guess you'll still be going on thinking about past experiences when you're in there and analysing and relaxing and going, I guess you still get a lot out of it.
But also ayahuasca's, excuse me, still in your system.
Yeah.
So whether you drunk on the first one, not for the rest, still in your system.
Yeah.
And you don't need to get the benefits of it while you're drinking it. A lot of the benefits are after the experience. So the fourth one, the theme of that ceremony that night was infinity, which everyone was super excited about. And when I went up to drink the cup, I said to the maestro was that he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go deeper, I want to explore. So therefore I had a larger dose than I drunk the previous nights. So I felt prepared for it, I guess. And as the ceremony took place, within about an hour of that, I wasn't getting any visual effects necessarily. So I started to get a little bit conscious that maybe I should drink more. And then I was going through the mindset, well, have I drunk enough? I've drunk more than the nights before, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to have the experience that I want. I'm still going to have an experience. So should I drink now? If I do drink, am I going to be able to stomach it? I was really concerned because the flavour was pretty intense. Yeah. Would I be able to hold it? Because it's quite hard to digest. Yeah. And second to that, because it was an hour and a half in, was I going to have a drink and then therefore have a really tough experience? And of course, everyone else is coming out and I'm still going. So I spoke to one of the helpers there who I spoke to throughout the week, and I'd said, I'm not getting much of an experience, I'm not getting the feelings. And he said, do you want to drink more? And I said, I'm not too sure, I think I'll maybe leave it for a little bit. He said, yeah, no, leave it for 5-10 minutes. And probably no longer than a minute after he walked away, I started to get the effects. And it was coming on incredibly heavy this time. As I looked into the room, so I went through a mixture of closing my eyes and opening my eyes. And as I opened my eyes, I was seeing, again, how do you describe something you've never seen before? You can only relate it to something similar. So maybe like 100 tentacled, large, brown, dark octopus, kraken type fucking thing, I don't know, in the room.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, so, maybe I've seen Stranger Things. Maybe that's what. Maybe, I don't know. It was kind of a dark brown instance. So I looked at it and I kind of started to get this vibe that I was going to have a tough night. So I asked ayahuasca not to. So don't give me a tough time. And I came over again to anchor myself in this instance. I came over to my knees, put my hands on my head, and I was getting these beautiful visuals. They were dark in nature, coming up towards me. But more than anything else, I felt a gripping, paralysing feeling in the bones of my neck, in my arms, where I felt paralysed and I couldn't move. And I felt that something was coming through. Now these were very common in people's visuals, snakes, serpents maybe if you like, and they were coming through and coming up towards me, almost like brown and luminous yellow, and they were coming up through, and this was an incredibly uncomfortable experience. I felt gripped in a little bit of terror, kept reminding myself again that I'm purging, it's a release of negative energies, and using, you know, the fears coming from myself.
Yeah.
This night got incredibly intense, I would say, and I don't remember. I can't explain much of it. What I can tell you is that if I was to try and explain it to anyone, it was almost like being strapped to the side of a rocket ship and being propelled out into the universe. And my body dissolved. I couldn't feel my body. I had no sense of me being me. Sound distortions. Fear, like I've never felt fear before. I felt like I was on the edge of a panic attack, even though I couldn't sense my breathing. I'd never felt, and it was too much information for my brain to even comprehend, and I was so far gone that I couldn't even rationalise to say that it's, you know, it's my brain taking the fear. So I just gripped on. There's a few times where it died down slightly. I got up and I went and got some help. I went into the shower. As I went into the shower, that was becoming incredibly intense still, and it came out of it. At one point, I was sat in the chair, and because I knew it was coming in waves as it subsided, that I had my hand on my chest, and as I looked down in the darkness, I felt something here. So I felt like a ball, and I pulled, which I can only explain was pulling my heart out of my chest. There wasn't a beating heart. It was almost like a symbiote venom type thing that you would see in the recent movie Venom. It was like black and dripping, and I could feel it. It was soft. It was almost like playing, when you like bread dough in my hand. I wasn't too excited by that one. So I tried to release it. I rationalised, at the time, is that I had my blanket. They give you blankets to keep you warm if you get cold, and I was that evening. I feel that I must have wrapped that blanket in my hand, and it's the only way I rationalised. I believe so. Towards the end of that ceremony, I was gripping onto it, and I remember at one point I was so far gone that the guy that left of me asked me how my evening was going, and I heard it in the faint distance. He was probably sat as close to you as we are right now, but I couldn't talk.
Seemed like
if I needed to ask for help, I couldn't ask for help. I forgot how to talk, didn't know who I was. Felt like death, I was seeing what I can only explain was the creation of the earth, the Big Bang happening in front of my eyes. I was getting pulled. Doctor Strange thing just going through like almost. Probably not as exciting.
Facial hair, you could pass it off.
I reckon so. Definitely I'll just get the cape as well with some grey. But
it's just like that. It's just
it was again, without seeing it, you can only try and articulate it as best you can. It probably won't do it justice. So it was incredibly terrifying. At the end of the ceremony, when they started to talk, I remember one particular instance is that he said something to do with thoughts, and one of the guys in the room laughed at that time. So at this particular time, it was a word around thoughts, human thoughts, and he said this, and then someone laughed after it. And this just kept on looping and looping and looping in my head, which wasn't happening. But it got intense in volume, and the visual I was getting was almost like you were looking under a microscope of bacteria that was multiplying, and these pink words saying thoughts were collecting and multiplying in this under this microscope and increasing in intensity and volume. Thoughts laughing, thoughts laughing, thoughts laughing. This was probably the hardest one I had. It was almost like reading a Batman comic with the Joker in Arkham Asylum, throwing it all out, and the intensity, the craziness of it. And that to me was insanity. I saw what the definition of insanity was. Eventually I came out of that experience. Probably by the time the ceremony died down, I was still having a really intense experience. I couldn't communicate, couldn't talk, and I think it was probably around midnight, about 7 hours later, that I actually came to my senses and was able to discover the experience, or talk about the experience, excuse me. And the following day, and interestingly enough, you go to bed, I probably fell asleep about 1 or 2 hours after, you come down to ground level pretty quickly. And I didn't know what to make of that evening. I couldn't really piece it together or translate it. By the following day I did.
Did you try to, or did you try to just go to sleep and then...
I think I was just ecstatic it was over. And the guy I was sat next to, because he sat with me for some period of time, he did a pretty low level evening. I just kept saying, fucking never again. What the fuck was that? Like, that was just crazy. It was too much for my brain to take. So I was trying to process it. By the time I'd thought about it the following afternoon, and I actually sat down and spoke to someone to share that experience, I determined that I'd asked ayahuasca to show me the universe. I wanted to explore and discover, and it showed me that in the literal sense.
Yeah.
Next time I'll probably clarify. I want that to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
But also I'd seen fear, I'd seen insanity. So since that particular moment, I'm incredibly grateful. But I want to go through that again? No. Would I? Yeah, I would. But what I saw from it is that we worry about the most insignificant bullshit in this world. Worrying about getting to somewhere on time, whether we're meeting other people's expectations, getting caught up in phone calls, returning things, paying bills, making sure, we can do all this stuff. And you realise on the grand scale of things, when you're presented with these, it's insignificant, So public speaking's a fear of someone's. If you asked me to stand up in front of 1,000 people and talk, versus going through that experience again, fucking every time it'd be the public speaking. But that's something that, people are fearful of, and I relate to that. So that was a big lesson. While it was not the most enjoyable lesson, it was the after benefits. So to me, that's like going to the gym. Your lungs are burning, you want to give up, your body's aching.
Never again.
But you get the benefit after. That's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
It's to push our boundaries and get the benefit of those hard experiences.
So you've had those types of experiences, and obviously from all of them, you said the fifth one obviously was its own again, but now you've come back, now you've had time to, like you say, look at it and think about it. What did you get out of it, and was it what you wanted? Was it what you wanted to get out of it, or was it what you needed, as you said ayahuasca does?
I think what I went there for, I was understanding, wasn't specific to what I've got, but what did I get out of it? Everything. It's very, very hard to articulate, because as human beings we try and translate the way we feel about something into a language when sometimes it doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
If I was trying to simplify it, a higher level of grounding in my life, more focus, more connection with certain stuff. Feeling a genuine appreciation and gratitude for my children and the time I spend with them, being more in the present moment, versus always thinking about what should I be doing next. Taking the time to appreciate things, being more at one with nature, something you hear all the time, right? And dismissed, both being from England, as, bollocks. And when I now think about it, it's actually bollocks not to think that way. Having a connection to nature, and understanding there's so much more out in the world than we think of, and we take things for granted. The world's not about walking around the shopping mall. It's not about having the nicest car. It's not about going out on the piss with your mates. These are experiences we can enjoy, but there's so much more to the planet, and there's so much more to the universe. And people can rationalise that this is just your brain on drugs, and maybe it is. But if it has these effects on people, and I don't believe that's the case, I really don't. But if it has these effects, if it's helping people find clarity in their life and focus, and it's improving quality of life, and it's healing people, because the people who work at these retreats and these institutions, they're truly all about healing people. They're magicians, they really are. And I feel like I've just scratched the surface of these experiences, and I've got a lot more work to do.
And I think, as you're saying, a lot of it, like you say, we try to rationalise it, you can't put it in words, but as you described with all of those instances, like you say, you described it in a good way. For me, I got a kind of a clear image that was probably nothing like what you were probably experiencing, but at the same time, like you say, a lot of it's feeling, if you know what I mean. You can't get that across, and like you say, it's only the person that experiences that can really enjoy it. But I think that's the good thing when you do these retreats, whether from me looking at the outside of you, whether it will change you or change your thing. Obviously we were worried you were going to come back in those Asia pants dreadlocks and quit the job.
Oh, like a peacock for the headdress or something. No.
Which you didn't. But
I just wear those at home.
Yeah, absolutely. But whether it changes you, I think, like, once again, I think for you, only you can know that in your feelings and so on, but I think one feeling it will definitely do, 24 months you were literally talking about this, and one feeling it will 100% that I know it's given you and will release you is that you did it. If you know what I mean. I think a lot of people in life, whether it's not saying advertising to go have to do an ayahuasca trip, but I think a lot of in life people always have these things they want to do and they talk about it and they talk about it and they talk about it and then they die. You know what I mean? It's in the old days. Is in I was one with these videos, talked about it, and then it was only after a point you go, just fucking do it. And whether it comes good, bad, whether it's what you wanted or what you needed, you've done it. Yeah. And I think it gives you that self-satisfaction that you did, and I think that from what I can see, it's definitely given you, obviously you've done it now and it's kind of what you wanted to for 2 years, which is a big deal.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, Pete, everything's action. You got to, if you want to do something, just do it. As long as it doesn't hurt other people and put other people at risk or yourself at risk, then do it. Take calculated risks sometimes. So.
Yeah, and go for it. That's good. Awesome. Well, look, thanks for sharing the experience. Obviously, it's personal, of course. So obviously, we always appreciate that people give out that part of themselves to share, and I think obviously people will enjoy it. I know I have. But we also like on the Pistol Pete to talk about causes and stuff that can help people. We work within the industry that does that. Is there anything, I think you mentioned an organisation earlier, but have you got an organisation you would like to give a shout out to for those that are watching, that they can do a little donation, do their little part to help out?
Not necessarily a donation as such. Obviously I say that I'm a regular giver to an organisation called MAPS.
Okay.
But if I was to say anything, I'm certainly not advocating the use of any illegal substances. I'm not here saying or preaching that this is something that other people need to do, and I think it's a calling. But I would, if I was to promote any organisation, if anyone has a calling or an inclination to do something like this, and they want to research it, I would highly recommend the Blue Morpho Foundation or Blue Morpho Retreats in Peru. And I would say that you just check them out on the internet. They're an amazing bunch of people. Like I say, it's almost like going to a clinic or a hospital. These people truly heal, and they've got everyone's best interests at heart as well. It's in a very professional setting. So that's Blue Morpho, and it's Blue Morpho Foundation also. It's run by Hamilton Souther, and you can find that online as well. So that's about as much as I promote.
Awesome, perfect. Well, look, obviously, thanks so much for joining. Obviously, explaining and sharing. We'll post a couple of pictures of your experience. If I can grab those off you, that'll be great at the end, so they can kind of see a little bit of what you got, as much as you can. But otherwise, cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for your experience, and hopefully the next time you go on, maybe I'll work up the courage to maybe come with you. I don't know.
Mate, no, I'd love to come, definitely, mate.
I'll see if I could. Cool.
Nice
Cheers.
one. Thanks, mate. Cheers.